Welcome to Chapter 1, Block 2 of Disrupting Dark Networks. What we're going to look at in this block is what is a network. So I'm going to explain specific parts of a network, specifically nodes, also known as actors, and ties, also known as edges. And we're going to look at different types of networks, complete and egocentric types of networks, and one mode and two mode, which is a form or a type of network as well. So first of all, what is a network? Here is a very basic, what's called a sociogram of a network. And what can we learn just by looking at this picture and knowing just a little bit about it? So what this network is it looks at women who work in a wiring facility, and it's looking at relationships of women who help other women in this wiring plant. So let's first look at the different parts of this network. The red circles, these are the individual actors. In this case, these are the women that work in the wiring plant. All right? The circles, though, can also be departments in a university. They can be corporations, they can be countries, co-offenders, individual terrorists in an ISIS cell. Whatever it is, the network that you're looking at, actors can be many different things. In this network, the circles are referred to as nodes, vertices, or actors. The lines between the red circles, these are called lines or edges, and they indicate a relationship between nodes. In this particular network, you will also see arrows on these edges. These arrows indicate directionality. So in this picture, the network describes helping relationships, or who was observed helping whom. And again, these lines between the actors are commonly referred to as relationship ties. And each of those ties, along with the arrows, tells us who helped whom. So for instance, you can see that some people are directly connected to others, whereas other people are not directly connected. So in order for W5's efforts or help to benefit W2, W5 has to help W3 first, and then W3 can use what they learned from W5 and in turn help W2. Because if you look in this network, W5 is not directly connected to W2, but has to go through W3 first. We can also count the number of people who help or get helped, and we'll learn metrics to help us do that quickly. But in this case, just looking at this, we can look at W3, and we can see that W3, for example, gets a lot of help. And this is indicated by all of the lines and arrows that are directly connected to the W3 node. So it looks that W5, W1, W4, and W2 all help W3. This might mean that W3 is new to the wiring plant and that these folks then are helping her get situated. See, already, just by looking at this picture of a network and knowing the very basics about what this relationship or what the relationship is in this network, we can already discuss things about each of these nodes and all the nodes together. Looking at W7, on the other hand, we see that W7 gives much more help than she receives. And again, this is indicated by the arrows away from or towards each individual node. And I said that backwards, so basically W7 gets more help than she gives. The basics here is that we can tell by looking at the edges and the nodes how, and knowing what this relationship tie is, in this case, who helped whom, we can tell a lot about the individuals in this network. And we will look at more and more networks as we progress through the semester, and we will look at more and more specifics, metrics, theories of each of these different networks. All right, continuing with what is a network. A network is a social network which consists of a finite set or sets of actors and the relations defined on them. Finite simply means that there is a boundary to it. Can you imagine if it was infinite? You could add all of the people probably in all the world. Have you guys heard of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Or 6 degrees of separation, basically that we are all only 6 other people away from every other person. So you have to create finite boundaries, and we'll learn how to do that as time progresses as well. Basically, with a network, think of a network as a snapshot in time and what that social network looks like at the time you took that snapshot. Okay, and can anyone see or think of a limitation of viewing a social network at just one point in time? And there are many limitations. So as we know in real life, our social networks are dynamic, meaning they're constantly moving. People are coming in, people are coming out, people are gaining ties, people are losing ties. And so when we look at a network at just a snap in time, we're missing that dynamic set or that dynamic characteristic of real networks. And then also a limitation is boundaries. How do we know who to include in the network? How do we know to exclude in the network? Again, this is all dependent on the goals of your research, and as we get through this chapter in time, it will be, or as we get through this textbook in time, it will become more evident how to create boundaries, how to know who to include, exclude, etc. Okay, and in social network analysis, the focus is on the relationship between the nodes rather than on the nodes themselves. So going back to that first picture I showed you of the women in the wire plant, the focus will be on those women who helped or did not help others. Who helped whom? That's the relationship, and that would be the focus of that particular network. Again, it's that interdependence versus independence. And this is very important to remember. Networks are interdependent. That means the people that make up the relationship tie are interdependent upon each other. All right, continuing with what is a network. A network is a set of concrete nodes, and we briefly just talked about that. And nodes are also known as actors. These can be individual people, criminals, animals. They can be collectives such as organizations, companies, or countries. So an example would be a network of victims of Bernard Madoff, countries importing or exporting humans for the sex trade, drug cartels trading in legal commodities. It can be anything that you can possibly think of. So a network is also a set of concrete ties, and remember the ties are the relationship. So a set of concrete ties, all of the same type that connect them. This means that when we look at an individual network, the ties between the people or actors in that network have to be the same relationship. So how do you think ties might provide opportunities? How do you think ties might constrain actors in a network? We will learn things like this as we progress. So each tie is a link or an edge or a relationship relation signifying some kind of relationship, such as is a friend of, co-offends with, or sells drugs to. And here, ties will provide opportunities, and they can also provide constraints. And we will be using metrics to look at these opportunities that networks might give us and look at the constraints they might cause as well. All right, network specification. This is continued looking at types of networks. So first we have what's called a complete or bounded network. This is relational data that are collected from all actors within the bounded network. And remember, bounded is just the boundary of the network, and the boundary is specific to your research. The boundary of the network are those people that you include in the network based upon your research questions. We also have egocentric networks, and this is probably what most of you guys, if not all of you, will be working on in this class. Egocentric networks. This is relational data that are collected between an actor of interest, called an ego, so a particular person or a particular country or a particular business, and all the other actors, in this case called alters when attached to ego, that are attached to this actor of interest. So note that this means we usually do not know how the alters relate to one another. That is also, though, not always the case, especially in what we are going to be doing in this class, pulling a network from a biography or autobiography of a criminal or criminal organization. All right, so for example, an egocentric network example would be the homegrown terrorist Omar Hamami and all of those individuals connected to him as he progresses through his radicalization to terrorism. Again, don't feel scared or fearful if you don't understand what's going on yet. This is a very basic introduction to networks, and as we progress through the textbook and you do your labs, all of this will become evident to you and a lot more easily understood. Okay, and the last bit for this block is forms of networks. Here we're going to look at two forms. There's the one-mode network, which again, the majority, if not all of you, will be doing. This is a network defined on only one set of actors, and in general, most networks are one-mode networks. As we progress through this chapter, you will see how networks are created in a matrix, and again, this one mode will become more evident. And then the other type of network or form of network is a two-mode network. This is a network defined on a set of actors and possibly a set of events or affiliations. It could be two sets of different actors, such as the Bloods and the Crips, and it can sometimes be called an affiliation network. So an example for two-mode networks, we could analyze a two-mode network that studies the relations between members of the Bloods and the Crips, with a relationship tie perhaps being murder between them. So who murdered whom? Did more Crips murder more Bloods? Did more Bloods murder more Crips? Or was there more murder that took place within each different specific group? We could also look at two different Hells Angels clubs, and the relationship tie could be drug sales. Again, it all depends upon who you're studying, what your research questions are, but it could almost be anything you could possibly think of.